Well, we are live here. I'm actually coming from Nomad Coffee Shop in Ballston Spa, New York today. James, you are back in your normal studio. It's a beautiful Halloween day here, and we have some regional rankings to talk about from the East region. We know a lot of people have been reaching out to us already, asking us what our thoughts are. We said watch the show at 2:30 live. Here we are right now. And JB, without giving anything away here right off the bat, how's your feeling about what you've seen so far, and then we'll break it down.
It was sort of 50-50. The top half, not really any big surprises, kind of who you'd expect. Bottom half, there were some names that sort of surprised me, though, and it looks like, Frank, we're maybe going to a more of a old school type of committee as far as how they're picking teams, not only in the East but across the country. So it's a little bit of a throwback, but certainly a lot of the teams that we thought would be up there are on there in positions that we kind of expected. But there were definitely a few surprises, namely one I know you and I are going to jump into and talk about, because once we saw the rankings pop up about an hour ago, we were like, huh. So much for our whole NJAC strategy.
Yeah. Well, as the first three line up there, we'll pause it right there. We don't want to spend too much time on the first three, and there they are. This is pretty much predicted except for number 3. So let's start up here. Brockport 8-0 at 503 strength of schedule. Their win is versus what will come down as number 9 Ithaca. You'll see in a little bit here, and we'll talk more about Ithaca at that time. Frostburg State comes in at number 2 at 7-0. Remember, they lose that game versus CNU in terms of not on their schedule due to the hurricane, so they will have 9 games on their schedule. They could not replace that game, as we had discussed with Coach Fitzgerald at an earlier date. Their strength of schedule is a 533, which is about 0.03 higher than Brockport's, but they have no regionally ranked opponents because Montclair is not ranked. That should be what's jumping out at folks right now, right there. RPI comes in at 7-0, 549, very good strength of schedule. Should drop off a little bit, we think, by the end of the season, but not by much. And they have a win, again, versus number 9 Ithaca as a regionally ranked opponent. Thoughts on the top 3, or should we just keep on going here?
Well, I think that we are giving away one of the surprises. Ithaca was a team that we sort of viewed as a bubble team. Certainly 2-loss teams are pretty rare to find in the rankings. However, I guess it's one of those things that's not necessarily that you lost, but maybe it's who you lost to and by how much. They played Brockport tough. They only lost that game by 6. They basically lost RPI on a botched 2-point play. They could have won that game. So they very easily could be 8-0 and in this 3rd spot, but give the Engineers credit, and certainly their strength of schedule. It does seem like a theme that we'll be talking about a lot here, Frank. Strength of schedule playing a big role in the rankings kind of across the entire nation.
This is no secret. Jim Catanzaro, in his interview with D3Football.com's Around the Nation podcast a couple weeks ago, did clue us in that was going to be a huge thing across regions that he was going to be maintaining, and so far so good, we think, in that respect, although maybe a couple oddities with respect to that we'll see in a few moments here. Number 4, Delaware Valley, 7-1. So you look at this and you say, wait a minute, there's a loss there, and there's some undefeated teams that we haven't named yet. So it's not all about wins and losses necessarily. As you said, it's about who you beat and how you beat them possibly as well. They have a 464 strength of schedule. Wesley not ranked, so there's no regionally ranked opponents. And also, who's not ranked if they're showing nothing in the RRO column? Misericordia. Well, they didn't play them. But I guess I'm giving that away. But it's showing, though, to me, an oddity in the strength that they're looking at in the MAC, because Del Val is way up here at number 4, but Misericordia, who has an identical record right now, not ranked. We'll talk more about Misericordia in a little bit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is too, these 4 teams that are up on the board right now are all teams that were in the 2017 playoffs. So that sort of prior year's success, definitely helps in informing these rankings. I think, it definitely has an influence, particularly when it comes to tiebreakers. In this, if for the same, let's say Frostburg was 8-0, and had they played that CNU game, the tiebreaker there, other than strength of schedule, perhaps would have been the fact that Brockport advanced further in the tournament last year than Frostburg and would probably still get the #1 over them if they had exactly identical records. One less game for Frostburg makes it a little bit easier to put them underneath, but that's sometimes how the committee operates. And this next one, Frank, that you just sort of flashed up there, a little Halloween spooky style, this was actually, to me, probably the biggest surprise of the day. As we said, 2 lost teams, although Portland should be 7-1, right?
Oh, actually, you are correct there, and we'll try to make that change in a moment here. They are 7-1.
Maybe that's what some of the Brockport fans tuning in are like, yeah, that's what they're going to be on Saturday after they play us. 7-2. But yeah, so Portland was a little bit of a surprise to me because they had that head-to-head loss to Alfred, who is not in the mix right now. They're only at 5-3 overall. So I was kind of surprised at how high Portland was, particularly with the 473 strength of schedule. Kind of seems like the Empire 8's getting a little more love than the NJAC is in this one, Frank.
Agreed, and hopefully this will actually get replaced in a moment here. In fact, we're going to come out of this and then reload that in correctly for folks. But yeah, Cortland getting that ranking is, showing, I think, in anticipation for a game, though you would think that if we're just anticipating games possibly, then Montclair would be showing up on this list as well. So I don't necessarily see full level of consistency on how they're treating certain teams here, but this does line up to say that, if Portland loses, they could very well, to Brockport, they could very well, and then beat Ithaca, be a very viable Pool C alternative up there, because they will have beaten a currently ranked team, and they will have lost to the #1 team in the nation, and it's not just who you beat, it's who you lose to in these situations. So, it's an interesting conundrum of sorts. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I would add about Portland, and I think especially for New England fans out there, one of the big wins that the Dragons had, other than their Empire 8 slate, is that they did dominate Framingham State 57-19 in week 2. And Framingham has an opportunity this weekend in playing WestCon in a de facto playoff sort of conference championship type of game. The next week at this time, we could see Framingham up on this board, which would further bolster Portland's resume. Even if they do lose to Brockport and fall to 7-2, they could stay on the board because they would have a win over a regionally ranked opponent.
Let's try to go back here and see if we can stop breaking things. And there it is. We'll go for 2. How's that? It's going to force us to do it. I love my PowerPoint reader here. First off, number 6, Salisbury, and then number 7, WestCon. I guess it actually is fitting that they're both appearing here because these are undefeated teams that are below two one-loss teams in these rankings. Yeah. Now, if you look here, Salisbury's strength of schedule not doing them any favors at 437. Their win against Wesley is pretty much being ignored right now because Wesley is not a regionally ranked opponent. But that said, their game versus them coming up, their win was against Rowan last week. That was huge, 45-7. That's what's being ignored. And I think what's happening here is that you have possibly some NJAC folks on the committee that are not necessarily, very high on Salisbury's multiple dimensions, or, to put it lightly, they're calling them probably one-dimensional. Right. So. They've been passing for, I think, now an average of 4 times per game. It's all run. Springfield made a living on this, so I'm not sure if it necessarily is a bad thing, but I don't think that the NJAC folks are necessarily supporting Salisbury here the way that I might be if I'm sitting on the committee, and then, not putting Montclair on there. Montclair, again, with the Wesley win, you would think would be ranked. If Montclair's ranked, Salisbury's higher, I believe, even with that 437 strength of schedule. WestCon loses a game in terms of wins because Dean is not a Division III opponent currently in terms of the rules that they use. This will also be the case for Husson later on when we look at things. So Western Connecticut really 7-0 when the committee is looking at them in the primary criteria. That's why the asterisk is there. They have a 483 strength of schedule. So now let me ask you a question, James. If we're using strength of schedule and neither of these teams really have a regionally ranked opponent, how do you rank Salisbury above WestCon?
I think in this case is the fact that they've played 8 games, whereas in the eyes of the committee, WestCon's only played 7, so they have one more win, so they're one level up. I mean, I think everyone knows in general that the NJAC is a tough conference. I mean, it's probably the toughest, at least this season, in the East. But it's interesting that, I mean, Salisbury really seems to have gotten dinged by the Albright game in week 1. Certainly wasn't their fault, but no one knew at the beginning of the year that Albright would end up being an 0 team at this stage of the game. So that drags their strength of schedule down. They haven't played the 2 top teams in the conference yet. So if one of the theories is, as a committee member, well, you can slot them a little bit low because chances are they could jump as high as to probably number 4, maybe 3, depending on how things work out with RPI, because their strength of schedule is going to drop playing against St. Lawrence, and then I think their last game is at they just played Rochester. So I mean, their strength of schedule is at, I think it's at its peak right now, and so there's room for Salisbury to go up if they happen to win out.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So we'll see how it plays out ultimately. There are 2 big weeks coming up here, as you know.
One quick thing. So just a Union. Well, how did I forget those shoes? Man,
yeah.
A win against Union would keep the strength of schedule pretty high. I think Union's still considered a pretty solid team. They're currently sitting at 5-2 overall. So if they beat Rochester this weekend, which I think most of us would probably predict that they would, they'll be at least 6-2 going into that final game, which will keep the Engineers' strength of schedule up there.
We have popped up number 8, and many of our viewers and Twitter followers and fans are big fans of Merchant Marine. I'm going up here, you're going with the mustache, however you want to look at it, Merchant Marine Academy in the regional rankings. I can't ever remember this happening in our 11 seasons of being active. We used to have 3 sets of regional rankings, now we only get 2 of them, and we get to see the final one. I can't ever remember this happening, and for good reason. They never had a win-loss record like this. 6-1 right now, 0603. Look at that, an 0603 percentage, strength of schedule percentage. That's being helped by Misericordia and SUNY Maritime as their out-of-conference opponents.
2 one-loss teams, yeah.
Yep. So, Maritime, 1 or 2 losses? 2 losses. They lost to Hudson, too.
Yeah, that's right. But one of the things I think that's good for the Mariners, even though they did lose head-to-head to MIT, and so there could be some Engineer fans saying, like, hey, what the heck, we're 7-1. We have a better record than them. We beat them head-to-head. The fact, I think, that they're probably going to be getting dinged because they played Becker, Curry. They did have a 2-point win at Endicott, which is a solid team and is in the running to be on this list next week if they can beat Western New England in the CCC title game effectively that we'll have on Saturday's D3 Blitzer show. So interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, this basically to me, Frank, communicates that Mariners, you win out and you're in. If you win your last 2 games, the first one coming up against Catholic, who hasn't won, so that's probably a win there. And then they have to play the Coast Guard in the Secretary's Cup in Week 11 on ESPN. They win those 2 games, finish the season 8-1. The only thing, I think we were talking about this off the air, is if Thomas More somehow manages to beat St. John's, if St. John's just takes the week off or something, it seems to me that the Mariners are in.
Yeah, Thomas More is coming in at number 10 in the South on their regional rankings there. So the committees have essentially lined this up to say that right now, in their opinion, the only team in the NUMAC that would be able to win Pool B if Thomas More were put up against them today, and only today, would be Merchant Marine, because there are less teams in the South as well. So for Thomas More to be kind of at number 10 tells you Merchant Marine's above them. We don't think necessarily that MIT is looking like they're above Thomas More right now, and Springfield obviously with 2 losses, not also, but we'll see what happens. There's a lot of football to be played, including that Lake Erie game for Thomas More coming up this coming week, which is a Division II not so hot team, as I put it nicely. Number 9, we've talked about them a couple times now. Ithaca, it's 6-2, 534 SOS, so that's pretty good. Losses against number 1 and number 3, and there were narrow losses at that. 1 point against RPI, and basically a touchdown against Brockport. Not shocked to see this. I thought that having them here would almost necessitate having Montclair here as well. It did not happen that way. But in terms of the best of breed, 2 lost teams, Ithaca and Montclair are those, I would say. And in this case, they chose Ithaca over Montclair. Let's get through number 10 first before we talk about this and get the rest of the teams up. And then we'll start comparing and hypothesizing a little bit. Western New England, exactly where I had them, number 10. With a 481 strength of schedule and no regionally ranked opponents. Now, who's missing? Notably, Misericordia at 7-1, MIT at 7-1, Montclair State at 6-2, and Husson at 5-2. Again, that Dean game does not count. The thing that jumps out at me here is that Montclair State's strength of schedule actually is better than Ithaca's by 0.031 points. And their losses are to number 2 and number 6, although number 6 would have been higher than 6 if Montclair had been ranked, I think, ultimately. So, you know, we've heard some whispers multiple times in the last couple days that Salisbury might get dinged, that, you know, look, they've got to play Frostburg, they've got to play Wesley still. Well, the Wesley win's not doing anything for Montclair, so I'm not sure how that's going to really help Salisbury, except for strength of schedule numbers helping out there. It's really the Frostburg game, but if they need Pool C, they lose the Frostburg game, essentially. So I kind of see Salisbury in a trap scenario here. I don't like what I see for them right now. If they win and then lose, will they be behind Cortland ultimately? Because Cortland has to play 2 currently ranked teams. I don't know. Yeah. And Ithaca's performance against Hobart's going to matter a lot for Cortland ultimately in that Week 11 game. Husson fans, I know you wanted to see your team ranked. There's no way in hell that was happening at 423 strength of schedule. Just saying. Montclair State, we talked about MIT.
The one good thing, the one bit of good news for Husson is that you win on Saturday, you're in the tournament. It doesn't matter, you know, you're going to end up, you know, seeded and ranked. You know, most likely, just if you know, think of the map at a 500 mile bubble. You know, I could see you could go to RPI. You could maybe, you know, go to Del Val. There's a couple of different locations where I could see them traveling to, just based, or they could end up playing at, let's say, Western New England or Endicott in round 1. So the good news for Husson fans is that you're going to win and you're in. Don't worry about these rankings. This is more the rankings. I think honestly, you know, Frank, come more down to Pool C, and then obviously, you know, some of the seeding and matchup aspects. But for Husson, all you got to do is win on Saturday, and you're good.
I love how this PowerPoint thing works here. There they are again in their entire. Let's just restart it multiple times. That's amazing technology. Anyway, what I was about to say is that that's certainly not going to help their strength of schedule. Pat Coleman was actually pointing out to me before we went on the air that he has never seen a strength of schedule this late in the season as low as Gallaudet's, which is at a .191, I think it was. I've never seen a strength of schedule below .2, and so that's going to feed somewhat into the strength of schedule for Husson ultimately. So their strength of schedule may fall below 400 by adding in Gallaudet to a certain degree. Although Gallaudet's win-loss is 5 and is it 2 and 3, or how is it even denoted? I don't even know at this point. So actually, it could do more harm than good ultimately. And Gallaudet is a 3 and 3 team overall, and I think one of those games may have been non-Division 3.
One of their Week 3 game against Apprentice was canceled due to the hurricane warning. So they lost to Alvernia in Week 1, and then again to Greensboro in Week 2. And then they won a couple of games in the ECFC. They won 3 games because they beat Alfred State, but they did lose to Dean pretty decidedly, 53-21, back on October 20th, based on just maybe we love to say the laws and syllogism here in the huddle. And so I'm guessing that Huston will probably win big this weekend, but they still got to line up and play the game.
JB, with them still on the screen here and not resetting on us, I'm going to ask you, what is your number one happy thought on what we've seen here, and number one disappointment right now? Start with the disappointment. Go to the happy thought afterward. We'll save the best for last in that.
Yeah. So I guess I would say that the Montclair situation is a little bit perplexing. Given what we've seen in the NJAC all season, and I think I was a little surprised by other sort of subtleties. I think it's great for RPI to be sitting at number 3. That's gonna end up working out nicely for them if they can win out for the rest of their schedule. And then it's just I think overall just. I think the best thing on this, if you're just a fan of D3 football in general, I think the Merchant Marine being ranked as high as they are for a service academy to get into this field and have a shot at making the NCAA playoffs is really awesome. I'm happy for those guys in Kings Point. I mean, they still, they've had some tough matchups, still to go. Namely the last game of the season against their number 1 rival Coast Guard, which is always a great game, no matter what their records are. But I mean, you were asking Coach Robertson, what game you should go to in Week 11. If it comes down to the Mariners making the NCAA playoffs or not, playing in the Secretary's Cup on ESPN, it's not that long of a drive. I would probably pick that one. So that's a pretty neat thing. But yeah, those were my initial thoughts.
There is a tug of war going on maybe between the MIT Springfield game. What's interesting here, and we have to note this because of what we're seeing here, the actual tiebreakers, etc., in the NEWMAC do not determine who goes to the NCAA playoffs from the NEWMAC this year, if anybody does. So, Merchant Marine at 6-1 right now, could have finished at 8-1, might still lose the conference because they have lost the head-to-head with MIT. If MIT beats Springfield and finishes at 1 loss, technically it's not Merchant Marine that won the NEWMAC title, but Merchant Marine appears to be the better team in terms of the resume that the committee is saying right now. So think about that, folks. Merchant Marine doesn't have to win the NEWMAC, but could still go to the NCAA playoffs. MIT could win the NEWMAC and get a lovely consolation prize of a trophy and a New England Bowl game probably at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So things to think about as we play this forward. Cortland looking like a possible Pool C candidate, win or lose here, although they'd have to lose to Brockport, win versus Ithaca, I think, to do it. And how they will be placed with respect to Salisbury ultimately, that's what matters, because for a long time, we've been assuming that Salisbury was a gimme Pool C team if they finish at 9-1 with the loss only to Frostburg in Week 11. I'm not so sure right now because Wesley's not going to help them much this week except first strength of schedule, as I said earlier. Last thoughts here. We got another one of these coming out next week. We have the Blitzer Show coming up on Saturday. And James, why don't you tell folks what the Blitzer Show is in case they have never seen it. We did it once last year.
Yeah, so basically the D3 Blitzer Show is our attempt at trying to be like Scott Hansen for 3 or 4 hours on Saturday, where we will have the broadcast rights to about 10 or 12 different games, the vast majority of which will be for conference titles and for playoff bids or at least playoff implications, depending on what happens in Week 11. So we're going to look at as many games at a time. We can go four to a screen, which is really cool effect that you've been able to produce, Frank, with this software, which is way above my pay grade. So I'm glad that you're running quarterback on that. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll try to, we'll be watching all these different games, taking you to stuff when it's getting close to a score or a big play. We'll be zooming in on these games and keeping track of these conference races that are really coming down to the wire here, and will definitely affect the rankings that'll come out next Wednesday, and we'll recap them at that time. But yeah, the Blitzer Show, about 4 hours of football, different games running around all the way from the northern part of New England down to Maryland and all sorts of places. So should be fun.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I go back down to New York City for this show because we need a lot of bandwidth for what we do in that show. And got about 200 megabytes worth, so that's about all we need to help produce that one. We have 16 games spotted right now as somehow influential, including Thomas More Lake Erie, because I think we want to peek in on that game to see what is happening there, and we're just going to wait for our rights on these games as well. So we can't guarantee all 16. We'll announce what they are on Friday night and give you folks instructions on how to watch. But again, next Wednesday we'll do this again and get some more regional rankings after everything shakes out this week. One thing I do want to add here, we should put this up on the screen, and you may have seen it earlier in our Coach Robertson interview. Here is the East Region Advisory Committee, and Eric Hart from Brockport is the chair of it. Now, if he's being discussed, his team's being discussed, obviously he cannot continue in the call during that part of it. So there's no nepotism going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Ralph Isternia from RPI there. Yeah, and we were having a...
sorry,
go ahead.
Not to interrupt you, but seeing the list at the end with Coach Goff, unfortunately, I think it was yesterday, the college in New Jersey lost one of their assistant coaches in a car accident. Guy was only 37 years old. Really terrible loss. I wanted to just look this up real quick, just because I think just bears mention, and I wanted to for all the D3 fans that are out there. Let's see.
His name is Donald Klein III. Yep, Donald Klein III, only 37 years old. It's so sad. I died, I believe, in a I-195 crash, veered off the highway, so I believe it was a single vehicle situation. Unfortunately, we didn't get to put something together as much as we normally would want to pay respect to him, so we'll talk about it maybe again briefly on Monday, when we do our normal host chat show. But very sad. We send our condolences out to the College of New Jersey. Here he is here, Coach Klein, who passed away on Tuesday in a single vehicle crash. And again, condolences, thoughts, and prayers out to our TCNJ family out there. It hasn't been the season you've wanted on the field, and now it's turned into a nightmare off the field as well. And we are here for you, as is the rest of the region and the division. JB, let's sign off. Folks, you can watch a replay of this show in a couple minutes when it does reset if you're watching it live and want to go back and see any of it. Otherwise, hit us up on Twitter at D3FB Huddle or on our Facebook D3 Huddle channel as well. Until next time, thanks for joining us.